Hey guys, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast. I am here at Modex and I am in ProShip's booth, joined by the co-founder of ProShip, Justin Cramer. And we're going to talk a little bit about carrier diversification, and we're also going to dive a little into AI and talking about when to use AI, when not to use AI, and where does AI really find a good place within the warehouse. So, Justin, how are you, sir?
Good, and yourself?
Good. Good to see you again. Yeah, we just connected at Manifest.
It was just a month ago or so that we saw one another.
Yes.
Got to have a great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're here at Modex. I guess why don't you tell us first a little bit about how it's going here?
Actually, Modex has been very good. Modex is usually a very good show for ProShip. It's where a lot of very large shippers and shippers of all size get an opportunity to come and not only look at software, but there's so much hardware as well. There's all the partnerships here. So if you're looking for somebody who can work with your WMS, with your ERP, so on and so forth, this is the one spot where you can really come and you can get a salesman from one booth and walk over to another booth and actually have those conversations and then look at the hardware that may go along with it, so you can really visualize the solution you could have in your warehouses.
Yeah, and I think that's such a great thing too, because it is like you said, it's like, oh, well, I can get this software, but what is the software going to work with? And then I can turn around and I can find exactly what it's going to work with, right? So it's a great place to find all those different solutions for all the different parts of the warehouse. But for maybe people that aren't familiar, why don't you just give us a little overview of ProShip?
We are a small parcel shipment execution software. We do some LTL as well, but basically if it involves, once it gets to the edge of your warehouse, once it gets to the edge of your store, and you're about to turn over custody to a carrier, that's where we come in.
Right.
So whether you're working in a store and you need a label out of your point of sale system in order to turn over to a DoorDash for a same day delivery or something like that, or a traditional carrier for a zone 2 shipment, or where we traditionally come from is your high volume warehouses. Warehouses that are doing 1,000 a day all the way up to several 100,000 a day. And you need to fill those 48 and 52 foot long trailers with as many parcels as you can fit in them per day in order to keep your customers happy. And of course, as you're trying to do that, you really want to ensure that you are not spending any more than you have to meet that customer's expectation. Yeah,
absolutely. We don't want to spend more than we don't have to, right?
Exactly.
And I think that makes so much sense, and it's such a great thing too, because we see kind of the differing consumer behavior and expectations and all those things. So to be able to have that platform to really do things like that, and like you said, the same day delivery, and how do I navigate that and figure that out, and what's the right and best option to do that at the lowest cost possible, right? Which is always important, is a great thing. So we talked a little bit about, when we were at Manifest, we just mentioned, right, we're talking about carrier diversification and carrier rationalization, I think, right?
Rationalization,
So tell us a little bit about kind of where we're at in terms of, because I think there's a lot of discussion, right, about, there's these regional carriers that are coming out, these other carriers that are focusing on next day, 2-day delivery. But we still have the big guys, right? We still got UPS, USPS, FedEx. So tell us, I guess, really how impactful are these smaller in comparison players to the market itself?
Now, that's a very interesting conversation, because when we take the annual data and we look at the big picture, more than 95% of all of your shipments are still going Amazon, UPS, FedEx, and United States Post Office. Okay, and it's really more than 95%.
Really?
So as we look at the remaining 5%, all of these new carriers that we're looking at, including same-day carriers, they're splitting that portion of the pie. But on the other hand, if we take that big piece of data and we set it aside and we compare it with what we're seeing with our customers, which we help execute about 2 billion shipments a year.
Right.
Okay. But as we look at that, the majority of our 10,000 shipment a day and above shippers are using 9 carriers or more.
Really?
Yes. So as you look at the two of them, what we might be seeing is that at the bottom of the pyramid, those of us civilians, so to speak, that are just going to the local store, we're only using those. But as you get into businesses have diversified across multiple carriers.
Right.
But also, as we know, there was a huge boom in carriers in the last 3 years.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see a little bit of contraction.
Okay.
We're starting to see a little bit of difference in funding. We're starting to say, well, Do I just add a carrier for the purpose of adding a carrier? Or how do I rationalize that? And sometimes we have to look at what are the modes, right? We talked about same day.
Right.
You're not going to get a lot of same day from your national carriers. Maybe Amazon. We'll see. That's still to be hashed out.
Yeah.
I think the jury's still out on what their use case is going to be best for as they start to roll out point-to-point shipping. But you've got same days. You got the traditional regionals. I'm going to point out OnTrack because they're probably the largest one now that they've merged with LaserShip.
Right.
And we see them rapidly becoming almost a national carrier with only a handful of states that are not being covered.
Right.
Is that what you need? Do you need an overlay of your national carrier? Again, that's going to be coverage. Cost is going to be a factor. What about the size of package that they're looking for? Is there new technology that they're enabling? So as you start to look at this, you start to build all these different points as to what's important for you in a carrier. And you know what? If you're a manufacturer with direct-to-consumer, you may have different needs than if you're a retailer and you're trying to do direct-to-consumer. So as you look at those points, you really do want to remove, maybe cost isn't as big a deal for you, but maybe same day or the mode type is. So when you're looking at that rationalization, you really do want to, you want to take ideas like what we provide on our website on how you can rationalize, and you want to replace them as necessary in order to realize, well, I have triple coverage throughout the entire East Coast from Mississippi East. Maybe I should be focusing a little bit more on my West Coast coverage, and maybe I don't need to complicate my warehouses with that 10th carrier, with that having to have a 10th door for that. So it's not a science yet. It really still is kind of an art. But I think the important thing is that as we're starting to come out of this expansion, we're starting to see ways to start measuring, to start looking at all those things, so we can start to rationalize and truly say, no, I do need those 10 carriers from that origin, or you know what, no, I only need 4 carriers from that origin. What I have not seen anybody do is say, I'm going to go back to a single carrier.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's good to have at least, some contingency there too, right? But I mean, being able to do that and also have that rationalization, I think it's, it's one thing to say like, oh, I'm just going to try and get as many carriers as I can so I can just diversify. But, if you, like
there's
you're saying,
operational effects there.
Yeah.
Where are you going to put those packages?
Yeah.
I mean, in a store, we found that you can really only have 3, maybe 4 carriers. Right? And in a warehouse, you think you can have more, but there's still a maximum number of dock doors you can pull up.
Yeah, absolutely.
How much more conveyor are you going to have to put, say you're a huge warehouse, how much more conveyor are you going to have? Are you actually going to be able to get a full trailer parked there the whole time? Or are you going to be palletizing and having to touch those packages 3 or 4 times to get them in there?
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, from the operational efficiency as well, it's just considering that, I mean, like you said, are you going to have enough volume even for that carrier to justify all the extra things that need to go into it? So I think it's very interesting. And I'm curious, you mentioned there that we're going to see some contraction potentially in the market, right? So if I'm a shipper, right, and I have, some of these carriers that are making up that 5%, right? Should I be concerned about this contraction? How can I protect myself if maybe one of these either consolidate or they don't work out,
Great question. So the best thing I can tell you, and look, I don't mean to pitch my product here, but there's a reason everybody who is shipping more than 2 carriers should have a true multi-carrier shipping software. Okay? If you have that software in place, if it's at the end of your WMS, if it's whether it's standalone systems, things of that nature, if you are prepared, if you have true multi-carrier shipping software, if you lose carrier A, even if you don't have a carrier C to replace it with, the system should just take over. You shouldn't have massive operational changes on the day that happens. Now, here's what we're speculating on is what is going to happen. Carrier XYZ goes out of business. Is it truly going out of business? Is it being bought out? How are these changes in the market going to occur? Okay, and it may be that some of these are just slow fizzles. So you may end up actually going, I'm sorry, you're no longer meeting your service requirements, and we are going to be removing you. So regardless of whether it happens unexpected from the carrier side, whether it's a slow transition, or whether it's a termination for cause, having multi-carrier shipping software should allow a warehouse, a store, even a 3PL to be able to handle that elegantly without affecting operations, other than maybe there's going to be a dead space on the floor that used to get those pallets.
Yeah, and sometimes we're happy to get extra space, right?
Sometimes, yeah, exactly.
So it might not be such a bad thing, but I mean, I think that's a great way to approach it, and you definitely do not want to have that disruption, right? I mean, you don't want to end up in a place where you're like, what am I doing with this now? And now I got to figure out and scramble how to do this, and so that my customers are still going to get the service level that they're expecting, because at the end of the day, like you mentioned, us as a civilian, right? We don't necessarily understand or maybe care in that aspect. Like if there is a disruption like that, it's like, oh well, why is that my problem?
Let's say your listeners may understand.
My listeners definitely,
but the rest of their families are like, I don't care what happened to this carrier. Where's my goods?
Yeah, the package is late.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely. So, I mean, I think it's great to know that you have that tool to be able to do that and help with those contingency plans, and also just streamline that process a lot better and make the best decisions for what carriers, not just have a carrier for the sake of having a carrier. So now let's talk a little bit about something that certainly is prevalent, I think, throughout this show and probably every conference at this point, right? Which is AI, right? So I'm curious your thoughts on AI within the warehouse.
So I think AI has a place in the warehouse, but more importantly, I think there are places AI does not belong. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that we've been trying so much to see, does this AI thing fit here or here or here, that we haven't taken the time to just cleanly identify where it doesn't belong.
Right.
And I'm just going to go back to high school math.
Right.
If it's something we can calculate, AI doesn't belong there.
Okay.
If it's something that we need to go to predictability, if it's something where we need to do probabilities, that's where AI belongs. So as we look through let's say orders coming down in the warehouse,
right.
a pick wave, that might be AI driven. Why? Because based upon the people you have picking, the product, the density, there are thousands of different combinations in which you can pick these items. And so the probabilities of getting a single pick plan that is perfect is pretty low. Okay? But once you take those items and you place them in the box, and we need to calculate the cost for that box, that's very straightforward. There's only one way to do that. And there's only one right answer. Okay? Producing a carrier label, there's only one right answer for a carrier label. If you get one bar off, well, they're going to have to relabel that package for you, right? So I think that's really what it comes down to. Not to oversimplify it, but that is kind of, as we've argued back and forth and discussed it and had these heated debates within our company, it comes down to, if it is calculable, and if there is one answer, there is no reason to put AI there. Okay? Now, I will say that as we go forward, one of the things that we look at is the time in transit, right? Because we want to enforce an expectation. We just talked about, if that carrier goes away, the civilians don't care. They want to know when their box is going to get there.
You're still in trouble,
Exactly. Well, we also know there's other things other than potential carriers going out of business that could affect that. There's Department of Transportation construction that may affect major highways, which will cause rerouting. There are weather conditions. There are whether they be all the way up to a big hurricane. In the winter, we're talking about freezing events, which could delay deliveries. And of course, throughout the summer, if you're in the Gulf states, you could be affected by a hurricane. What we are starting to see now, especially with AI, is companies looking at how can they take those external factors into mind, so that you can predict that, let's say I'm in Miami, okay, we know there's a tropical depression a couple hundred miles off, and NOAA has made a prediction. We may say, hey, look, customer, you need to either have this delivered on Tuesday for an express fee, or it won't be delivered until Friday, because we're expecting the hurricane to go through. What are we doing now? We are setting better expectations for our customers. And we are, in this case, we are having to use AI to help prepare those expectations. Okay? So I'm not saying there's no place for AI, but I'm saying there are very clear places, such as costs, where AI does not have a good use, and it would not be a great expenditure of energy to try to look for.
Interesting, yeah, and I think that makes a lot of sense too, especially because we look at the consumer or the civilian, as we've been calling them, right? That relationship. I mean, even just the aspect of being able to communicate something like that, I think goes a long way in the consumer mind. Even if it's going to be later than originally expected, at least they're getting communication that's going to happen instead of they're waiting. Like for me, for example, before I came here, I broke the camera on my phone, right? And I tried to get a phone, was supposed to deliver last Friday, said it was out for delivery, UPS, and then they changed it later at the night. Oh, it's going to deliver on Monday. Well, Monday I'm already here, right? And the phone is at my house. So that doesn't work for me. So I mean, at least that communication and more kind of update and stuff like that is a great fit for that. But I agree with you. I mean, there's things where, we don't need to just slap AI on everything, right?
Yeah.
Maybe marketing says maybe we should, right? But from an actual operational perspective, I mean, there's certain things that are just, it's just black and white, right? It's either this or it's that, right? So there's not that there. So I mean, it's a really interesting perspective there, and I wonder. I mean, are we going to be seeing any AI solutions coming from ProShip at all, or?
You will see us partner with AI solutions where it makes sense. Like I said, we are looking at because we are about the execution piece.
Yeah.
We are very much about what happens from the store, from the warehouse, from the cart.
Yeah.
Okay. There are other companies in the industry that deal with that post-purchase experience,
right?
And are also gathering that information to understand when there is a low pressure in this part of Georgia,
right?
Maybe that's going to spin off a tornado or something of that nature.
Yeah.
And as we look with those, we're looking at a very clean way to feed data back into the system so that we can express that to the rest of the enterprise software stack.
Yeah.
So that means letting the OMS and the e-commerce suite know so that we can warn people in the cart. That means, again, if the OMS does a resourcing process, then when it goes to source those packages, maybe we move that from the southern fulfillment center to one that's up in Ohio or something of that nature, in order to avoid potential labor concerns, because labor won't be able to get there, right? So it's not revolutionary. It's not what we want it to be, but it is an appropriate step that will cause greater predictability. And the idea is the greater predictability, the more your customers trust your cart. The more they trust your cart, the more they come back to it.
Right. Yeah. It's all about kind of creating that reoccurring customer, right?
That being said, we've already worked really hard to make sure that when we do actually put a label on that, that's going to be the lowest cost label to protect our logistics budget while still exceeding or meeting that customer's expectation.
Yeah.
Again, bringing them back into the cart for you.
Right. Absolutely. And I think it's such a key thing, because it's hard when you don't have that that touch point that brick and mortar gives you, right? So you only have so little to go off in an online experience to make it a good experience, right? And bring that customer back. So it's great that you guys are focused on that and helping not only like the shipper themselves, whether it's the company shipping the product or it's a 3PL helping a company ship that product, being able to allow them to do that and have that tool to do that, I think is a great thing. So it's always a pleasure to connect with you here, Justin, and talk about things within the industry. Really appreciate your thoughts. And if people are interested in learning more about ProShip, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, look at ProShipInc.com. That's ProShipInc.com. And of course, we'd love to be on the show again at some point in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll for sure have you on in the future, and definitely we will put all that information at thenewroutes.com so people can easily find it. We'll also put it in the show description too. So Justin, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
Thanks, Kevin.
All right. Thank you, sir. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, The New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesAreSexy.com and get your own.